In February this year, Ridouan Taghi was sentenced to life in prison for a series of murders committed over a 2-year period from 2015 to 2017. This included the killings of lawyer Doug von Wiersum and the well-known crime journalist Peter de Vries. The trial lasted nearly 6 years and it was held at a high-security courthouse known as the Bunker in Amsterdam. Such was the concern around the so-called Marengo Trial that heavily armed police stood guard over the building throughout the duration of the case. The trial followed Taghi's arrest in Dubai in 2019, where he ran his criminal empire, the so-called Mocro Mafia. Thought to be one of the most violent and important cocaine distributors in Europe, it operates out of the gateway ports of Antwerp and Brussels. But the Mocro Mafia is more than just Ridouan Taghi. It is an umbrella term for organized criminal groups born out of the Dutch-Moroccan community during the 90s. And in July this year, German police shared its fears that they had expanded into Germany after a series of kidnappings and explosions in Cologne. The Mocro Mafia are active in several countries, the Netherlands, of course, and Germany, but also Belgium, the UAE, Suriname, Colombia, and Spain. If we look at Western Europe, the region where the Mocro Mafia is predominantly located, the score for criminal markets under the Global Organized Crime Index have increased from 4.06 to 4.48 out of 10. In fact, almost all criminal markets increased their scores during that time. And the largest was the cocaine trade, now at 5.77 out of 10. And that is the highest regional score in Europe. Alongside that, Western Europe's criminal actor score has also seen an increase. With me to discuss the Mocro Mafia is Sarah Fairs, an analyst with the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime and author of the recent article, Violence Without Borders: Why is Drug-Related Violence Spilling Over into Germany? Welcome to the Index, Sarah. Now, could you describe who the Mocro Mafia are and when they emerged?
Let's start with the term Mocro Mafia, which is often widely indeed used to describe these groups, but rather more so reflects a collection of independent but also often collaborating criminal groups throughout Western Europe. We have, of course, the Taghi group in the Netherlands. We have the Turtle Clan originating in Belgium. And then there's also quite a lot of groups active in Spain, Germany, and other places in Western Europe. And each of these subgroups have their own leadership structure, geographical focus, and are also sometimes in conflict with one another. Initially, in the early days, those groups were mostly engaged in smaller scale criminal activities. For example, the hashish line coming from Morocco to the Netherlands and other parts in Western Europe. But today they are most notorious for their role in the cocaine pipeline into Western Europe. And although many members have their roots in Morocco, today a significant number of them are second or third generations born in Europe with very little connection, if at all, with Morocco. And many high-level members are not from Moroccan background. They include Dutch criminals and individuals from other countries like the Antilles, Suriname, Romania, and the list goes on. But the name Mocro Mafia has stuck in public debate.
That's really interesting. And you talked about the fact that, they're now predominantly engaged in cocaine trafficking. Can you tell us what position they hold in terms of the global cocaine trafficking economy, particularly in relation to Europe?
Yes, so the Mocro Mafia is indeed very dominant in the cocaine market in Western Europe. There are estimates that they control about a third of the European cocaine market. But of course, those figures are very hard to verify. But nonetheless, it is clear that they play a considerable role. But it wasn't cocaine that was always their main commodity. They started out with hashish, and then around the early 2010s, they realized that the profit margins on cocaine was much, much larger than of hashish. There are estimates that it is about 10 times the profit that they can make over hashish. So the criminals, not only the Mocro Mafia, but also other groups in Western Europe and elsewhere, were very quick to seize that opportunity. And in the European context, drug trafficking groups in the Netherlands, and Belgium, and also Spain to a certain extent were very well situated for the cocaine pipeline into Europe. That is because the very same factor that make the Netherlands and Belgium major logistical hubs for legal commerce also attract the flow of illicit goods. So the strategic location along the North Sea is an important factor, as well as the extensive ports and road infrastructure that we have in the Netherlands.
You know, Sarah, what I think has become quite shocking, at least within Europe, is the level of overt violence that the Mocro Mafia has been willing to use. Um, is there any particular reason why they operate this way?
One of the reasons of their increasingly growing willingness to resort to violence is to send a message for those standing in their way, which is not only competitors but also law enforcement, journalists, witnesses, which is of course a very troubling development. Over the years, we have seen numerous explosions of grenades in the Netherlands as a result of the cocaine trade by the Mocro Mafia. Some of them have made international headlines, some have not. There have, of course, also been a few high profile killings, as you mentioned. The lawyer Dirk van Wiersum in 2019 and Peter R. de Vries in 2021. So, to send a warning sign to those potentially standing in their way is one reason. But another reason is that Mocro Mafia, of course, consists of numerous subgroups which are also in competition with one another. And when large amounts of money is at stake, disputes can, of course, easily turn violent, especially when they have an easy access to weapons, which the Mocro Mafia has. And one example of this intergroup rivalry is what we call the Mocro War, which erupted previous decade and revolved around the disappearance of 200 kilograms of cocaine, which some members of the Mocro Mafia thought was stolen by others of a different group. And this internal war has led to multiple assassinations, shootings, and bombings across the Netherlands and Belgium. So it's both sending out a clear signal to others, law enforcement, authorities, as well as competitors within their own group.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And of course, you know, the prosecution of Ridouan Taghi was a huge trial and attracted international attention. Could you explain briefly who he is and how he rose to such a prominent position before his arrest?
Ridouan Taghi is indeed the most infamous figure associated with the Mocro Mafia, but before that, he's had a very long journey of climbing the ranks as a criminal. He was born in Morocco in the 70s and moved to the Netherlands with his parents at a very young age. And growing up, Taghi was mostly involved in petty crimes, small crimes like burglaries and theft, the more classic boys hanging on the streets type of situation. And it is believed that he started being involved with more serious organized crime when at some point he inherited a hashish trafficking line from a family member. So from that point onward, he oversaw a trafficking route of Moroccan hashish entering the Netherlands. But as we've seen in the 2000s as well as the 2010s, cocaine started to become much more widely produced in Latin America than before. And with it being much more profitable than hashish, Taghi, like many others at the time, were very quick to jump on that opportunity. One of the reasons why Taghi was able to rise to power in the way that he did was because he was very strategic about establishing direct connections with South American cocaine producer, cutting out the intermediaries and increasing profit margins. He was also very strategic about partnerships with other organizations outside of the network. For example, he is known to have had very, very close ties with the Kinahan cartel in Ireland. And already then his leadership was marked with extreme violence. It has definitely helped him throughout the years to eliminate rivals and assert dominance over the Dutch cocaine trade. And up until recently, these strategies had been very, very successful. He was hiding in Dubai for many years and continuing his operations from there. But then in December 2019, Taghi was finally arrested in Dubai, which at the time was considered a major achievement for law enforcement in the Emirates and in the Netherlands. And then following his extradition to the Netherlands, he was sentenced to life imprisoned for various charges, including murder, drug trafficking, and of course, leading a criminal organization.
Sarah, let's talk about law enforcement. Where does that fit in? You know, in your view, have they been successful in tackling the macro mafia? Why, if they are, and if not, why not?
Yes and no, I would say. Some operations by Dutch authorities have been very targeted and very successful in disrupting specific networks or individuals. One example of such a success has been the EncroChat case, in which authorities from various European countries, including the Netherlands, were able to intercept millions of messages exchanged among key criminals, which has led to many arrests, seizures of drugs, weapons, and also being a major setback for the operations of the Mocro Mafia. And of course, the arrest of Ridouan Taghi in 2019 was also considered a major achievement. That being said, the decentralized nature of the Mocro Mafia and their ability to adapt to the circumstances have meant that in practice, the organization continues to operate even when key leaders are removed. So, for example, when Ridouan Taghi was arrested in Dubai, the cocaine trafficking operations into Western Europe did not stop. I'm sure that was some sort of setback at the time, but as we now know, his son Faisal was very quick to take over. And a similar thing happens when law enforcement is focusing on disrupting specific supply chains. So the Dutch authorities at some point have implemented something that is called a 100% measure, which means that 100% of all the shipments coming from high-risk countries like Colombia and Mexico, all of them will get checked for drugs. So what the drug traffickers did was reroute the shipments to, instead of going from Latin America to Western Europe directly, they were rerouted to, for example, West Africa and North Africa, so that the origin of that shipment no longer says it's coming from a high-risk country. So essentially, even though there are some successes, at the end of the day, it is a never-ending race of law enforcement and other authorities playing catch-up with criminals who are very quick to adapt.
Yeah, and I think it's so accurate what you say about the adaptability. It's both fascinating and horrifying in terms of how the law enforcement constantly seems to be playing catch up, right? I guess my last question is, in general sense, what does the rise of Mocro Mafia and other criminal groups tell us about the organized crime landscape in Western Europe itself?
It shows us how quick criminals are able to adapt and exploit the transnational nature of the world that we are in today. They are able to establish direct ties with those in producing countries. They are able to leverage countries with less oversight where they can hide or use as a rerouting for their illicit commodities. They are able to launder their money abroad. So naturally, international cooperation in the fight against not just the Mocro Mafia, but also other groups is very important.
Thank you, Sarah, for being part of this episode for the Index. If you'd like to read Sarah's article, Violence Without Borders, Why is Drug-Related Violence Spilling Over into Germany? You can find it in the summary notes of this podcast. If you'd like to explore more about organized crime and resilience around the world, head over to the Global Organized Crime Index website, ocindex.net. We'll be back soon with another episode of the Index from the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime. I'm Tin Lai Wen. Thanks for watching.